Welcome to A Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, a podcast about geek culture by lawyers with your hosts, Ben Siders and Kirk Damon.
And welcome back to Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy, the podcast that asks interesting questions that don't have any answers, with your host, Ben Siders, that's me, and the other guy is, as always, Kirk Damon.
That's Kirk, as in the Captain of the Enterprise.
We are intellectual property lawyers and certified geeks practicing law in St. Louis, Missouri. You can find me, Ben, on Twitter at Benjamin Siders, and you can find Kirk at KirkDMN. You can find this podcast's Twitter feed and other social media accounts, I think, on our website, lggpodcast.com. All right, it is officially time for the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Star Wars Holiday Special.
We've tried to make an effort this year to reduce the amount of Star Wars content that creeps into the rest of our episodes and focus all of our energy here, sort of like a battle station, for example, that focuses laser beams and then has enormous destructive power. So we'll see where this goes.
We can make all sorts of Star Wars puns we'll be avoiding for a little while.
So last year at this time of the year, Disney had just announced a plethora of Star Wars content. I'll insert here what we said about that last year. We're going to talk about two things. Mostly we're going to focus on the Star Wars Visions series of anime shorts for a couple of reasons. One, it's something out there that's new. Two, neither Kirk and I have talked to each other about it at all yet, so this is all fresh.
And we have both seen it, too.
Yeah, we've both seen it. And then also, we haven't really talked about anime too terribly much, and I know we have a lot of listeners who are really into that. So It seemed like a good time for us to kind of dip our toe in that water.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vision's really interesting. I'll start the thing with it, which is so interesting. So I have a middle school daughter who's actually gotten seriously into anime, and actually even more seriously into manga. She would rather read it than watch it, but she's gotten kind of seriously into anime. We started just watching a little bit of anime. We also watched the original Godzilla because she didn't believe me when I said they were rubber monsters, and she thought that was awesome. Yeah, she actually really liked the original Godzilla. But the one of the things with it is she doesn't particularly care for Star Wars. She finds that Star Wars, she doesn't like the lightsaber battles. She finds them a bit violent for her taste, basically. Is what she doesn't mind the blaster battles, but she doesn't like the lightsabers. They just sort of bother her. She loved Visions. Absolutely loved Visions as a way to portray it, because I think she sort of accepts the anime being that slightly more fantastical appearance. Mm-hmm. And so even what you see, and in some sense it can be kind of graphic, because anime can be, is very stylized and stuff like that, and she was. It's
handled very well in these. These are also very violent, and one of my general remarks about all of these Visions episodes. Let's back up a little bit. If you don't know what I'm talking about, they did 9. I think they originally said 10, but only 9 I think were released. Shorts. They're between 15 and 20 minutes long. Would you say it's about right?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on which one it is. Some are a little shorter, some are definitely a little bit longer.
By 9 different, I don't know if they're studios, but they're combinations of writers and directors. And I get the impression they're kind of given free reign to tell basically any story they want.
Yeah, I mean, the stories are definitely set in Star Wars universe. They're very associated with Star Wars universe. But they're also, they really have no connection, I don't think.
I don't think there's any characters like that we've seen before in it. Just a lot of recycled sound effects, music, things you've seen before. It definitely feels like Star Wars, but nobody I recognize. So I think what we're going to do, Kirk and I are going to give you, if you haven't seen these, we're going to get into some spoilers. So just if you haven't seen...
And a couple of these do have pretty major spoilers.
Yeah, they really do.
You really want to watch them.
So we're just going to go over each one and give it maybe a couple minutes to talk about our general thoughts about it. And then at the end, we're going to rank them, because what fun is a podcast if you can't rank things? And then we're going to wrap up with sort of our discussion of The Bad Batch Season 1, which I have now seen. We'll do that at the end, and then maybe talk a little bit about what's coming up next year. So... Let's dive in. The first Visions episode is called The Duel.
Yep.
Written by Takashi Okazi and directed by Takanobu Mizuno. I don't know who any of these folks are. I assume that if you're into anime, you probably recognize a lot of these names.
Yeah, and I also say the thing is, I'm unfortunate that I just do not know anime directors or writers or anything along those lines. I recognize certain styles, like some of these definitely look like things I'd seen.
Agreed.
But I've never been into directors, actors, or anything along those lines. I'm much more into plots and characters.
Yeah.
So it's, to me, we don't necessarily know who they are in conjunction with these. We may very well be butchering somebody's name. We may very well.
We probably are. I do not speak any Japanese, not a lick. If it was Spanish, I'd have a chance, but.
And we may very well, not be kind to somebody who's, completely visionary and we don't realize it.
Yes.
But
this is our ignorance speaking. That's all. So we're just trying to get these names out there for those of you who are familiar with anime. You may know some of these folks. So Okazaki, I've heard of at least. I think he's more known for.
I had heard of.
Yeah, I think he's more known for like art, manga, that that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of the artists that do manga are also involved with this. So I'm going to read for you the synopsis from Wikipedia to give you an idea of the plot, and then Kirk and I will discuss what we thought. So, The Duel, set in an alternate history 20 years after a war between the feudal Jedi Empire and a renegade Jedi sect known as the Sith, a lone wanderer known only as the Ronin witnesses a legion of former stormtroopers attempt to besiege a small village. The Ronin fights the leader of the bandits, a self-declared Dark Lord of the Sith, armed with a heavily modified lightsaber. We'll get to that in a second. While his droid saves the villagers. The Ronin, a former actual Sith, lures the bandit leader into a trap and kills her. The Ronin is later shown to be collecting red kyber crystals from each Sith he has killed, and then gives the leader's crystal to the villagers, saying it can ward off evil. All right. Kirk, I loved this one.
So did I.
I thought this was fantastic.
I thought this was one of the best ones on the thing, and I love the fact that it was first, too.
Yes.
Because it's a complete alternate universe, Star Wars in many respects, although it's a very recognizable Star Wars.
It has a very samurai feel to it, like the village does. Even the droid has like a little straw hat. Like,
The thing that I really liked about this one, also quite frankly, it felt very Japanese.
It did. Like the lightsabers looked like a katana, like a scimitar. It had like a thin, narrow blade. It wasn't round. And that's one thing I noticed through a lot of these is there was a lot more variety in the way the lightsabers were constructed and the way that they looked. Yeah. I think some even had like angled blades. So it makes sense to me if you think about it, because Star Wars borrows a lot from Kurosawa films. So we've kind of come full circle where the plot of Episode 4 is influenced by The Hidden Fortress. I've never seen it. I just have read that, and based on the plot synopsis of Hidden Fortress on Wikipedia, I think it's true.
Yeah.
Hidden Fortress is I think, famous for telling the story through the viewpoint of two minor characters. Yeah. Two beggars in that film.
Two droids in Star Wars.
Two droids in Star Wars. So I think that's where Lucas got that idea. But the Jedi sort of with their mythos and the swords all kind of fit that Japanese stereotype. And that all just fits in here wonderfully. It just works so well.
Yeah. The other thing I really have to say I really liked about The Duel is it is not clear who is good, who is evil, or what anybody is.
No, it definitely is not. The animation style is really interesting. The lightsabers are colored.
Yeah. Everything
Everything else is, I think, black and white.
It's kind of that I don't know, like tan color that I think you associate a lot with. And
a lot of the animation is deep shadowing that just moves around on the characters' faces to convey motion.
Yeah.
It's really interesting stylistically. Probably the most unique of all of these, I would say.
Also, quite frankly, one of the coolest to watch.
Yeah.
It just, as opposed to some of the other ones, this one is beautiful.
It is. And it's interesting because the color palette is extremely drab.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to watch it. I've gone back and watched it twice more. I liked it that much. One of the things I really thought was interesting about it is the way that they use the Force in this is a lot more subtle. It's there, but like one of my favorite scenes was they're fighting on a log and it's kind of going towards the edge of this waterfall and gets stuck. And then one of the characters gets knocked off. Another character uses the Force to pull the log, but not to like throw it at somebody, but just to move it to split the water so that you can see behind the waterfall.
Yeah.
Like, that's a nice subtle thing where you don't need to have everything be big and huge and just like, oh, look what we can do with the Force. Just a little subtle plot point to be able to see something. So this one I thought was just fascinating. At the very end, when he kind of pulls his cape open or his robe open, he's got that string of red kyber crystals, and you're like, oh my gosh, he's been hunting down and killing Sith, and he's got a red blade, so he's a Sith himself.
He has a red blade too, and that's part of the thing with it. It does a sort of great job of that, showing you the nature of the color of the lightsabers mattering, maybe the best way to put it. Which is one of those things that I think has become much more important in conjunction with, and the style of the lightsabers being personal. One of the things I happen to be watching Rebels right now, and one of the things in the Rebels that was great is there's a scene in it, and it's an offhand scene when they encounter an old Jedi battlefield, and there's like old abandoned lightsabers on it that are ancient and relics, and they pick one up, and it's a green blade with cross beams that looks exactly like Kylo Ren's. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, that was actually just kind of a cool touch.
Yeah.
To have that idea is, okay, like these are all personal and they're all different shapes. Again, you get like the evil, the Jedi Sith Lord in conjunction with the Duel has got a very odd lightsaber.
Yes.
It's a strange weapon in many respects because
she's kind of like an umbrella, and then it's got a bunch of lightsaber. Like her lightsaber plugs into the bottom of it, but then the blades like turn sideways and come out the sides of the umbrella, and she like twirls it and uses it. It's kind of weird, but it's done so well in the story that it doesn't make you laugh. Like a a less skilled production of this kind of story, that might look silly and just kind of jarring, but it really kind of works pretty well here. So
yeah, it really is kind of interesting the way it works and how well it works, because it's a very odd weapon, and just even the way she uses it is kind of an odd weapon.
Yeah.
But it fits because you recognize it's very deadly. It is, it's sort of dangerous for everybody because it's got so many blades and they're everywhere. It reminds me a little bit of the Inquisitors again in Rebels, where they have the twin blades and like they can use them to fly and sort of stuff like that. But it's one of those things where it's in this one, I think it almost works better than there because it really gets you this cross that this is a very evil person. Like that's the thing with it.
The other thing I loved is the main character, the Ronin. The way he's presented is a character of complete self-possession and confidence. Yeah. He's kind of sitting here drinking tea. His droid gets broken somehow, and this whole conflict starts up. He just kind of wanders into it. It's got kind of an Old West feel almost like a spaghetti western a little bit. Yeah. With the confrontation in the street. But I love before that, he turns to there's like a Sullustan there and says, hey, I need you to fix this droid before this tea boils, and puts a tea kettle on. And so you as the audience know that like he knows something that's going to happen, and of course that all. He fixes the droid, and the droid saves the day, and it's all just really well done.
Yeah, it does have a definite feel of American gunslinger movies.
A little bit, yeah.
Kind of that extreme confidence. He does really have that extreme confidence, which is also kind of fun because he's going to save the day, and then suddenly you see the red blade lightsaber, and you're like, hold on a second.
Yeah, they caught me on the hop there too. So one final note on this one, because we can't spend too much time on any of these because there's 9 of them. Lucy Liu is one of the voice actors for the English version, which I did not pick up on when I watched it.
I always liked her as an actress, actually. Yeah. she's an action actress that doesn't get used enough.
Well, then one thing we'll notice throughout these, most of these make a concerted effort to use as many voice actors, even for the English versions, of some kind of Asian heritage, which is a nice touch. So Lucy Liu is in this one. Okay, episode number 2 is called Tatooine Rhapsody, written by Yasumi Atarashi, directed by Taku Kimura. And here is the synopsis. During the Clone Wars, a Jedi Padawan named Jay attempts to escape from the war only to stumble upon a Hutt named Gi. Gi offers to take, or maybe G? I remember how it's pronounced.
I think it was G.
G offers to take Jay in if he becomes the lead singer of G's rock band, Star Waver, and Jay accepts. Years later, during the reign of the Galactic Empire, the members are hunted down by Boba Fett. Fett eventually captures G and reveals that G's relative, Jabba, wants to execute him because he's not part of the crime syndicate. Jay inspires the other members to go to Tatooine and save G. They convince Jabba to let them play one more song before G's execution. The song is loved, and Jabba spares G and becomes the band's first sponsor. Voice acting notes: English voice work by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Bobby Moynihan from SNL, Monsters U, and other animation, and none other than Jango Fett himself, Tamura Morrison.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting...
which I didn't realize he was in this. So.
Yeah, I happened to catch that one as it went through. But
so the first thought on this one, as far as the story went, despite me being a musician, I hated this.
Okay. I actually liked the story in this one because it amused me. And the reason it amused me as to what it was is... This is very not epic Star Wars.
No, it's really strange. So me and my daughter, like Kirk, my daughter, who's the same age as Kirk's daughter, is really into anime right now. And so I asked her if she wanted to watch these with me. So she sat down to watch this one, and the minute it started, I mean, I could tell by the animation style I wasn't going to love it. It was just a bit too silly for me, and I just did not like the songs. It was very music heavy. So this one, the juxtaposition between the subject matter, the presentation, and the setting really jumped out at me, and I just couldn't get past that. So I didn't care for really any part of it. I did like that this is really the only one of these that is not basically ultimately about Jedi somehow. Although this is a Padawan character, he doesn't do anything Jedi-like. He's just a lead singer of this band.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of exploring that because music and bands did have a role in Star Wars, especially episodes 4 and 6. But I don't know, something about the animation style maybe, this one just did not resonate with me at all.
See, it's interesting because to me, I actually really like the animation style in this one. It's probably one of my favorites from it, though I would say arguably it's a little more American as animation style comes in.
This was the more traditional big doe-eyed character thing, whereas the first one felt a little more realistic.
Yeah, now I actually liked the music piece of it. And again, just as my own personal sort of things in conjunction with it, my favorite Japanese anime probably always has been and always will be Macross. Robotech, for those of you who are used to the American version of it, but Robotech really doesn't share the same plot as Macross. And one of the key elements in it is music as a weapon. is one of the key elements of Macross. And I really felt like this was exploring that same kind of concept. What I liked about this one was it was hopeless from the start. Very early on, in that you realize this is hopeless. Like, this is not going to end well for these characters, but they want to sort of make the best of it they can. It was a very association of a dark universe, a sort of dark, uncaring universe.
It's the only one that also really reuses any existing characters, Jabba and Boba Fett. Neither one, I mean, they're both kind of minor characters ultimately, although Boba Fett's getting his own thing now, but in the original trilogy, Boba Fett was kind of a big nothing.
Yeah, that's true. But again, what I liked about this one was the fact that, to me, this felt very different. It did kind of have a little more of an anime feel than some of the other ones did.
Yeah.
And I did really like that. I also liked the characters in this one. I thought the characters in this one were a little more interesting than some of the other ones, were given a little bit more depth than in some of the other ones, especially for something that was this short.
It was very
G
short,
is
yeah.
a very sympathetic character.
Yeah.
You really kind of feel for what it is. You feel for Jay, too, because he's kind of a failed Padawan. And that was what I kind of got in this, is the idea of all these people were in some sense failures, and they came together, they found this thing, and they did so because of essentially unexpected and unavoidable loss, and that kind of worked. So that was sort of my take of it. I kind of like this one in some respects.
One thing that also, I think this is the one, there's a lot of these, so I'm going from memory here, but I think this is the one where the animation of the spaceships looked like it was done in like 3D modeling animation, but the actual anime portions looked like conventional two-dimensional drawings.
Yeah.
I thought the transitions between those two styles was also pretty jarring. It reminded me a little bit, if you've ever seen the utterly botched attempt to make Dragonlance into a movie.
Please don't.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that, just go watch. Just go Google it. Don't. It's not worth your time. But
it's like watching the Star Wars Holiday Special. It's a train wreck.
So bad. It's such a great cast and such a terribly botched bit of animation, but it had a little bit of that aspect to it. So this is interesting. Kirk and I disagree pretty significantly on this one. All right, number 3 is called The Twins, directed by Hiroyuki Imaishi and written by Hiromi Wakabayashi. Synopsis. In the aftermath of the Empire's defeat, the remnants of the Imperial military begin the construction of 2 conjoined Star Destroyers that house a large super laser capable of destroying planets.
Wait, a large super laser capable of destroying planets? They never build things like that.
Why would they do that? Using Sith alchemy, which I wish they talked about more, they're able to create 2 Force-sensitive biological twins named Kare and Am, who they then train in the dark side of the Force. The twins eventually become the leaders of the Remnant and plan to use their super weapon to destroy the New Republic, but Kare goes rogue on the day the weapon is supposed to be fired because he has a future vision of his sister's death. Then they fight in the most anime fight I've ever seen, I think.
The most anime fight there is.
And then at the end, Kare uses his X-Wing and the power of hyperspace to superpower his lightsaber and cut the whole thing in half, which that part is pretty cool, by the way. And then he crash lands on Tatooine and vows to rescue his sister from the dark side. Voice acting, Neil Patrick Harris and Alison Brie.
Yeah.
Didn't recognize either one of them.
I sort of recognized the voice, but I wouldn't have been able to play it.
No, I wouldn't have either. So, okay, this one was weird for me. The conjoined Star Destroyer thing. The minute I saw it, I was like, how on earth would that work? Because the center of gravity of these two things would tear them apart if you try to move either one of them. So this is me being probably too analytical for anime.
And this is one I have to admit, I liked aspects of this because I liked the fact that it was so very anime.
It was. They have a whole fight like floating on top of the Star Destroyers. Like, have you ever seen Naruto or anything like that? This I don't watch any of this stuff. But I pick up on it because of the zeitgeist of my house with my daughter watching it all the time. And I've seen her watch Naruto, and Naruto is 45 minutes where they just go back and forth between 2 styles of animation, and they don't even animate the characters talking. It's all like in their heads.
Yeah.
And they basically just explain everything they're about to do, and everything just feels made up on the spot. So one character will say, I will now destroy you using my power of whatever. The other character goes, haha, but you cannot destroy me using that power because I have the defense of whatever. I will overcome your defense of whatever. It feels like the beginning of Toy Story 3, where Andy keeps getting out, well, I've got my attack dog that eats dinosaurs. Like just making up new things as they go. This one had a lot of that, and then a lot of just, I don't know, overwrought violence, basically. It's not really violent, but lots of screaming and explaining why we're screaming. I don't know. This is the type of anime I really don't care for. And although the story between the brother and sister I thought was actually pretty good, I liked the whole idea of it. I didn't even mind that they were like on top of a Death Star or a Star Destroyer. I was thinking, you know what, they're Sith basically. You know, why do they got to breathe oxygen?
Exactly.
You know, who cares? I really
Jedi proved they don't have to, and holding their breath in gas at the beginning of episode 1.
So yeah, the actual conflict between them I didn't find all that compelling. It was actually kind of annoying for me because it's, like I said, that type of anime I don't like and just find irritating from a narrative standpoint. But at the end, when he gets on his X-wing and like plugs in the hyperdrive, I expected to roll my eyes through that, but they actually pulled that off pretty well. I thought
this was one that my problem with it was I enjoyed the actual conflict between them, the actual battles between them, but the setup just felt forced.
Yeah.
The whole idea of them being twins, the one going rogue, you didn't really get a lot of the stuff with the vision. Like, they gave you a little bit of it, but it didn't make any sense until the very end. It was one that I really kind of, and I sort of hate saying this, it felt like there was a pretext to make this cool battle scene, which was a really cool battle scene. And it's not like Star Wars has not done that before.
Yeah.
But that was my problem with it. I thought the battle scene was great, and I liked it because of what it was. This is, in my take, this is the most anime of any of these in the
They even had the tentacles. Like, her use of the lightsaber was like a giant tentacle lightsaber, like reaching out and grabbing his lightsaber. And I don't know, there was a lot going on there that we could probably psychoanalyze. But not one of my favorite ones of these. All right. The next one is The Village Bride, directed by... Wait, I got my sheet right. Yes, directed by Hitoshi Haga and written by Takehito Onishi and Hitoshi Haga. So I guess Hitoshi gets credits on both. Years after the Great Jedi Purge, a fallen Jedi named F is drawn to a remote planet by an explorer named Valko. Valko explains that bandit raiders have reprogrammed old separatist battle droids and are holding a village hostage. The village chief's daughter, Haru, and her fiancé, Asu, intend to surrender to the bandits as collateral the following morning, while Haru's sister, Saku, wants to fight them. The next morning, the bandits reveal that they have captured Saku and attempt to execute her, but F and Falco intervene and kill all the bandits. F then departs. I didn't recognize any of the voice actors in this, but I did look them up, and they all appear to be, American or Canadian actors of Asian descent. So this will be a theme that we see is excellent use of probably underutilized actors.
Yeah. I like The Village Bride.
I did too. I like this one.
The reason I like this one is because the Jedis are secondary in this.
Yeah.
And what you also have is, I think it's F in particular, you really have the idea of a Jedi Master constantly teaching. Mm-hmm. And teaching things that have nothing to do with Jedis or, combat or anything else.
And it wasn't clear the Jedi were going to intervene at all on this. They were kind of on the sideline. They were just there. And I really didn't expect them to get involved. The story is really more about this family, the couple, her sister, different ideas about whether to fight or not, the right thing to do, how you achieve peace. This one also felt very much very anime thematically.
Yes.
And I like you. I also enjoyed it. The animation style I liked. Just thought it was just excellently done all around.
Yeah, this is, and again, I think the real thing I liked about this is, in some sense, this is an exploration of good and evil from a non-Jedi point of view, even though Jedi are present.
Yeah.
And the thing that, to me, I really felt like in this, and the way I'd put it, I felt like a Jedi apprentice in this one. That I didn't understand what I was seeing.
Yeah.
Because you have the master who clearly knows what's going on. Like, they're very calm. They clearly sort of know what's going on. They know what to expect. They know when the fight is going to be necessary. And you, as the watcher, have no idea. Yeah. And I really thought that was well done to me. And again, the way I put it is, to me, I felt like a Jedi apprentice in this one.
It felt a little bit like the Dagobah sequence. Like, we're learning about this the same way that the characters are. Like, we as the audience are being taught. So that I like, like I said, almost every one of these involves a Jedi somehow. But this one I thought did a nice job of kind of putting them to the side and not letting the setting upstage the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they did a great job with this one. And really, in my mind, this is not so much a Star Wars story. It just happens to involve Jedi, which is what makes it a Star Wars story. This can be anywhere. This can be universal.
I wish they did more stuff like this, where it's just a story, a small story, tightly focused, small camera, small lens, just a moment in time to just see a small part of this universe. Really like that.
To me, that I really enjoyed The Village Bride. It surprised me, actually, because it was one where it started. I'm like, where's this going?
Yeah, I feel like I was kind of the same way, but as I was watching it, I got pulled into it. Okay, the next one is called The Ninth Jedi, written and directed by Kenji Kamiyama. Many generations after the Jedi Order became mostly extinct, Margrave Juro, the Jedi ruler of the planet Hyazlan, invites 7 masterless Jedi to his aerial temple that orbits the planet in order to receive lightsabers, whose design has been lost to time. That alone I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, I thought the concept was kind of neat.
Yeah. Juro's droid gifts the first lightsaber to a young Jedi named Ethan, the youngest of the 7, as proof that they exist, promising the other Jedi that they will receive theirs once they are completed. Down on the planet's surface, hunters working for the Sith capture the sabersmith, Lazima. Lazima's daughter, Kara, who is also Force-sensitive, escapes with the finished lightsabers, presents them to the Jedi. But then we find out that 6 of the Jedi accompanying Ethan are actually Sith impersonators who killed the Jedi that Juro originally invited. Juro then reveals himself to have been disguised as his droid all along. There's a fight, they kill 5, spare the 6th, who's revealed to be an old friend of Juro's, and so it goes. This one I also really, really liked.
Yes, I really liked this one. The biggest thing I liked in this one was I loved the discussion of what the lightsaber was.
Yes.
And the idea of it being personal. This is things we've seen before. It's stuff that, had existed in Clone Wars, a little bit with the idea of the lightsaber. It's stuff that I think Disney has also played around with in its parks.
Yeah. Was this the one where she turned the lightsaber on, but it didn't have a color yet?
Have a color. Yeah. And the idea that it doesn't know who you are because you're Force sensitive, and it doesn't know who you are yet.
Yeah. So hers was like kind of almost transparent with like a little black glow around it.
And what I liked about it is the idea that it's the Jedi color, the color of the lightsaber means something.
Yeah.
Which is something I think we've kind of all thought at some point in time.
Well, I think it was in source material for the role-playing game that like the Kyber crystal has a resonation frequency that influences the color, but also the Jedi has to use the Force to activate it somehow. I vaguely remember this from the West End games.
Yeah, and again, what I liked about it is the fact that the color mattered, which gives us stuff in other places. So like the fact that Rey's lightsaber is yellow, is an interesting idea. For those that have seen, the stuff in Rebels, Snips. I always call her Snips. Lightsabers are white because she's sort of neither, Jedi nor Sith. Is a kind of neat concept as to what it is, and so I really like the idea that they have the color means something, which also is something they could potentially explore at some point in time in the future of the green versus blue, and even the purple, and getting that more into the universe.
Yeah, I also I really liked the Sabersmith character. He had kind of a Hatari Hanzo feel to him, like I know Hanzo's like a character in Japanese cinema that's kind of been recycled. It was in the Kill Bill series as well. The Hanzo sword is always like the most amazing sword, and the Sabersmith Lazima kind of had that feel to him. Also, there's a really small sequence towards the end where the daughter, Kara, is trying to get the lightsabers up to the temple, and she has to like badger this like tired droid into like piloting her up, and she just like stands there and pouts at him until he does it. It's really funny because the droid's like an old rusted fat guy, like it's like a fat droid. Like he was built to be fat. And he's just sitting like, I don't want to go. And she finally gets him to do it. So I kind of like that. Little touches like that to the story. The way that the Jedi were introduced. And the idea that the Jedi Order is gone. So are we like thousands and thousands of years like into the future of the story we already know?
Yeah. The other thing I liked about it, quite frankly, was this one has the big twist in the middle of it. The revelation of the Jedi. That's, spoiler alert, we just told you.
The droid is the guy. Because they're all waiting for Juro or Euro to come out, and then it turns out that he's inside the droid the whole time.
I have to admit, I sort of guessed that. But it was one of those things with what I liked about this was the twist and the idea of what does it mean to be a Jedi? And you see her with, again, sort of spoiler alerts, her clear saber changing color as
she learns to use it.
And kind of that kind of concept with it to me this one really did that. This in some sense did the most advancement in any Star Wars plot.
I was going to say, this one I think you could take and expand into like a more fulsome property, for lack of a better word, like a series or something else.
The other thing that's really cool is when you find out at the very end, the space station, and they show the imagery of it.
It looks like a lightsaber.
Lights turn on, and it's an inverted lightsaber aiming at the planet. Which is one of those things, again, to me, this one gave you the most, for lack of a better term, background knowledge of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that's what I liked about it.
All right, the next one is called Toby. It's T0-B1. Directed by Abel Gongora and written by Yuichiro Kido. Shortly after the Great Jedi Purge, a droid named Toby lives on a deserted planet with his armless creator, Professor Mataka, and dreams of becoming a Jedi. One day, Mataka tells him that to do that, he must find a kyber crystal so he can forge a lightsaber. Toby scours the planet, can't find one, and then he defies Mataka's orders to never enter the basement. There, he discovers a starship and accidentally sends a signal that alerts a Sith Inquisitor to their presence. Mitaka reveals himself to be a former Jedi. He hides Toby and his old lightsaber hilt. When Toby leaves his hiding spot, he finds out that the Inquisitor has ransacked Mitaka's lab and killed Mitaka. Toby continues his research, successfully terraforms the planet, is later confronted by the Inquisitor, fixes Mitaka's lightsaber. Toby is revealed to be powered by a kyber crystal designed by Mitaka to be able to wield the Force. He ignites a lightsaber, kills the Inquisitor in a duel, and then departs the planet to explore the galaxy and uphold Mitaka's legacy. So this one, the animation style, the aesthetic, I absolutely hated. But
I have to agree with you on that one. And I know what style it is. It's a very distinct style.
It's very distinct. It's very. I was watching. I thought this is made for babies, but it's not. The story's not. The story itself, I actually kind of liked. I kind of wish Toby was not a droid. I just find droids generally annoying in Star Wars. But the story itself, I thought was not bad, and the whole idea of it's just sort of the Luke Skywalker story all over again. It was even kind of a desolate desert planet, I think.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, it was very desolate desert planet, definitely.
So the story was fine. It wasn't particularly inspired, I didn't think, but it was fine. But I just could not get past the animation style.
Yeah, and I completely get the thing. The animation style bothered me about it. I also found this story to just be too big. I mean, it's almost multi-generational. I mean, in the way they did it, and it's 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
So I think that was
even another one that's got a similar problem. We're going to come up on here in a few episodes.
Yeah, and that was, I think, my thing with that. I also, quite frankly, I think the exploration was supposed to be the idea of a droid being a Jedi.
Yeah.
And the concept of, can a droid be a Jedi? Can they sort of can they wield the Force, stuff like that? I thought it was an intriguing exploration, but I didn't think it was done well.
Yeah.
That was the thing with it. So that was my take from that one, is that to me, it just didn't quite mesh right. I liked the concept, but again, to me, it just didn't quite mesh right.
Yep, agreed. Okay, the seventh one is called The Elder, written and directed by Masahiko Atsuka. Centuries after the death of Darth Bane and the initial extinction of the Sith, Tajin, is it Tajin or Tahin? I think it was Tajin.
I can't remember.
As Padawan Dan are sent to explore the Outer Rim when Tajin senses a disturbance in the Force. They land on an isolated planet and arrive at a remote village where they learn of a mysterious elder who hiked into the mountaintop. Dan follows the elder's trail and meets the man who reveals himself to be a former Sith who left the Order before it fell apart. The Elder wounds Dan, and Tajin arrives to fight the Elder. Tajin narrowly manages to kill the Elder, who decomposes into a rocky sediment and detonates an explosion that destroys his ship as he dies. As they leave the village upon Dan's recovery, Tajin tells Dan that being a Jedi means being kind-hearted, so they do not end up like the Elder. I loved this one.
I didn't.
No?
This is the first one we're going to disagree on, I think. One, I loved the Elder. I think he's a great character. But I didn't like the plot.
Let's look at voice actors. David Harbour from Stranger Things. James Hong, who if you don't know who that is, it's Mr. Ping from Kung Fu Panda. But I will always remember him as Lo Pan from Big Trouble in Little China. And then Jordan Fisher, who I'm not familiar with, but just look based on his Wikipedia page, I think he's 27 or 28, already very accomplished. So excellent cast. But Kirk, go ahead. So you did not like this one.
I didn't like this. The reason I didn't like this is I sort of, to me, it got to me the idea of don't be brash. Again, I kind of look at, what's the learning point of what these things are. And what I found bothersome about it is, and I hate saying this, I found it predictable as to what was going to happen between Dan and the Elder and stuff like that. I did really like the Elder as a character. The idea of sort of the, I'm past my prime, I know it, and I need to die in battle type of character. I just found that his foil in the Two Jedi was uninteresting. That was the thing for me.
See, that's the part that I thought was really interesting is sort of the resignation of both the Elder and of Tajin, that they're eventually going to succumb to time. And even Tajin was saying, like, I'm getting weaker every day while you're getting stronger, to his Padawan.
Yeah.
And the whole point was, as you gain this power, you have to learn how to wield it properly, or you'll wind up like that guy.
Yeah, it's a Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. But again, to me, what bothered me with this is I really loved the Elder as a character, and Dan and Tajin just didn't work to me. To me, they were they were an uninteresting foil from the Elder who I kind of wanted to root for.
Yeah.
Like, that was kind of the weird thing, in conjunction with it, because I was like, he's a much more interesting character. Even though he's a bit crazy, I think, is the way to put it. But
Yep. All right, well, that's interesting. We disagree on that one. That was one of my most favorites. All right, number 8 is called Lop and Ocho, directed by Yuki Igarashi and written by Sayawaka. Only one name given. Maybe they have like a Sinbad thing in Japan, or Japan too, where you just get one name sometimes. Okay, synopsis. During the reign of the Empire, a rabbit-like alien slave named Lop escapes her captors on the planet Tau and is discovered by the planet's clan leader Yasaburo and his daughter Ocho, the latter of whom convinces the former to adopt Lop as his daughter. 7 years later, the Empire has occupied their planet and is exploiting it for its natural resources. Yasaburo wants to drive the Empire off their planet, while Ocho wants to cooperate with the Empire. After failing to convince Yasaburo to join her, Ocho enlists in the Imperial Navy despite Lop's protests. With Ocho gone, Yasaburo passes down the family treasure, an ancient lightsaber given to their ancestor and passed down the generations, to the Force-sensitive Lop, and departs to confront Ocho, who blinds Yasaburo in a fight, but Lop arrives and injures Ocho, who is forced to flee. Lop then vows to return Ocho home. I didn't even rank this one in my rankings because I wasn't even sure where to put it. At various points in this one, I loved it and hated it. I think what I found the most off-putting and difficult to get past was the character design for Lop, who every time I looked at it, I just had in the back of my mind, furry convention. I could not get past that.
Lop is kind of a strange character because she's a rabbit.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Now, I had a different thing. I actually had the character from Zootopia in my head.
Yes,
Zootopia. Who she does actually kind of look like as well. And it was I couldn't get that out of my head, sort of, to put it that way. What my take from it was, I really liked the concept of this one.
I did too.
What's the Jedi? I also really like the portrayal of the Empire. That, people don't kind of know what to make of the Empire, but the people who are in power are like, this is evil.
Yeah.
But even them as the kids are kind of like, wait, we're not sure.
Well, and also they explore the idea that although the Empire is, of course, supposed to be evil, we talked about this before on our podcast about how the choices in the Star Wars universe are kind of given a binary good and evil, but that doesn't reflect reality. And we've talked before about, blowing up the Death Star means slaughtering millions of innocent people who had nothing to do with the Empire or its oppression. So is it a, ends justify the means type of thing, or is it for the greater good? And here we have a character who's not a bad character, sort of looking at it and saying, joining forces with the Empire, or at least, cooperating to some minimalistic degree, is the best thing for me and my family and for our planet, which is also a theme we'll get into when we talk about the Bad Batch later. This idea that there are nuances on the sides here. We saw that show up in The Mandalorian a little bit, where the Imperial officers were talking about, what we just talked about, how many people have been killed by the rebellion who had done nothing wrong. And now we see it playing out here as well. So
if there's one thing I like about Disney and Star Wars right now, is this exploration of the Empire, which fits with the broader theme. You guys have listened to prior one, my idea of what are monsters, stuff like that, and the Cruella episode I talk about. We've really gotten to this idea that evil is nuanced, which I like that, think even the Empire in this, like, you get the impression the Empire is, just flatly evil, but you also get the fact that there's some nuance. And what I liked about it was not that the Empire is good. It was the idea of, is she evil for cooperating for good reasons? And that's what I liked. Again, my take with this one, I enjoyed this one. I think this was one of the longer ones, too, if I remember correctly.
Because it has like a 7-year gap. Like, there's like a 3-minute introduction where they rescue the rabbit, and then it's like, and 7 years later, I'm like, wait a minute, you only got 20 minutes to work with here,
And it was kind of a weird introduction to her. I thought it was kind of, and again, I had trouble with her character design, but I got the idea that she was supposed to be clearly meek. That was the reason they made her look like a rabbit. The other one being strong, because she's more cat-like, I would put it. And the idea of it sort of being the weak daughter helping. I think this is one that I think had a lot more to it than necessarily you get on one watching. Again, I liked it. To me, the thing about it was, again, since I didn't like the one prior to it, sort of the 2 or even almost 3, I think it was prior to it, 2 prior to it, this one kind of all of a sudden I did like, and so I kind of wonder how much of that was also, seeing them as the...
Yeah, because I watched these in order as well. When I got to this one, I was like, when I first started, I was like, I really cannot... I'm serious, that rabbit design. And my first thought when they introduced the rabbit was, they better not give her a lightsaber, because she's going to cut her ears off every time she flips around and tries to use it. Which
Twi'leks don't have a problem.
They should. I think they just edit that part out. This one I struggled with. I think I liked it more than I wanted to, but I really wish they would have made Lop something else that was not a furry, basically.
I'm kind of the same way. I didn't like the animal nature of the characters. I think it would have worked a little bit better for them to have been, quite frankly, a little more human.
Yeah. All right, and the last one is called Akakiri, directed by Yoon Choi and written by Yuichiro Kido. Prior to the initial extinction of the Sith, a Jedi named Tsubaki, who has been suffering from visions of an unidentified individual dying in front of him, reunites with his old love, Misa, a princess who has been overthrown by her dark side-wielding Aunt Masago.
By the way, we should mention, this one's the real spoiler one, so if you haven't seen them, don't listen to this.
With the aid of guides Senshu and Kamahachi, Tsubaki and Misa make their way to the royal palace. Masago captures Tsubaki's friends and overpowers him, and then attempts to convince him to join her as her apprentice. Boy, I've never seen that before. Yep. When Tsubuki refuses, Masago's masked henchmen attack him. Tsubuki kills them, but also accidentally kills Misa, dressed in their uniform, just as he had foreseen. Completely broken, Tsubaki agrees to join Masago, forming a dyad to resurrect Misa, and departs. This was what the plot of the prequel should have been and was not.
Oh, yeah. This was one of my favorites in the end. I thought it was also a great place to end because this one ends tragically.
Also, George Takei is in this.
Yeah, which I didn't catch that.
George Takei. I didn't either. I looked that up.
I really enjoyed this one. I liked the portrayal where you slowly see his vision of what is going to happen. He knows it's a tragedy. It's done like the Yoda-esque Luke vision. You know, it's a tragedy. The master is trying to talk him out of it. That you will face what it is. This is the scene on Dagobah with Luke and Yoda going the other way.
You know what I loved about this? So this is classic Shakespearean tragedy, right?
Yes.
This is Romeo and Juliet. This is King Lear. And then I love that Kurosawa often would do basically Japanese cinema versions of Shakespearean tragedies. And now we have Star Wars based on Kurosawa, and then this. So we're layering upon layering upon layering. This one was excellent. I really shuffled between where to rank these, and I've had this one at various times as my number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4.
I can see that.
But yeah, this one was just extremely well done. I was actually moving around the house and like getting generating stuff when it was on, so I didn't catch all the nuances of the plot. But I do remember being done with it and just thinking like, wow, that was just incredibly well done. And also, unlike some of these where maybe this is just me and my taste or my lack of familiarity with the genre, I didn't have any problems with the animation style here. But some of the other ones I were off-putting to me just because of those
I thought a couple
choices.
of the animation things, difficulty in this one, in that it was the blurry scenes were a little hard to deal with because of being purposely blurred and sort of the way they were blurred in a classic anime style, I would say, you know, where it was clearly drawn, it was just then purposely blurred. The thing that I did like is slowly becoming clearer. Again, to me, the plot of this one was the best. I also have to say, this was the perfect place to end. I also have to give credit to the Visions of putting this as the end one because it is the tragedy. This one ends tragically. The rest don't. And so it's one of those where I really thought they did a good job with this one. I thought he was a very interesting character. And again, what I really liked about this is Luke and Yoda gone wrong. It's the same scene in Empire Strikes Back, virtually identical relationship between master and apprentice, showing that it goes wrong and how it goes wrong. And it goes wrong entirely because he misinterprets what he's doing. And I also caught on how quickly you caught it. When they captured her in the conjunction with this, the next time they showed the vision, I realized what was going to happen. I caught the fact that it was his guards, and she was going to disguise it. She was going to be disguised as one of the guards.
I didn't catch that.
And it was one of those where I was like, "This." You could see it coming from me, and that's what it was. And I was like, to me, again, what was so brilliant about this is this was everything the scene with Anakin and the Empire should have been, and wasn't. Yep. You know, I mean, maybe it was the reason that it was made is, quite frankly, he was trying to retell that scene.
It could be. I would say this one probably of all of these, I would say had the best screenplay, like the best script.
Yeah, in many respects, I think it does. It's definitely one of the most interesting, you know, as what it was. And again, to me, it was one of the most enjoyable, and I thought it was the perfect place to end. Yeah. It's also one of the shorter ones.
It was relatively short. Okay, so rankings. I'll give you my rankings, and Kirk didn't know I was going to make him do this, so I'll let him. I'm going to stall here while Kirk looks over these.
Yeah, I think I know what my rankings are going to be.
So my number 1 is actually still the first one, the Duel. Maybe it's because I saw it first, but they came out of the gate with a bang, and I've seen that one several times again, and I just loved it. So my number 1 is the Duel, the first episode. My number 2 is the Ninth Jedi, the one about the lightsaber temple. It takes place far in the future. My number 3 is actually The Elder, so I think Kirk and I will differ significantly there. My number 4 is Akakiri, the last one we just talked about. My number 5 is The Village Bride, although, I mean, that one could have really gone up because it was excellent. My number 6 was The Twins. My number 7 was Toby, and my number 8 was Tatooine Rhapsody. And I didn't rank the one with the rabbit because I can't. It's like an Untapped when I have a beer in a style that I don't like. I feel wrong ranking it because it's not made for me.
Yeah, you definitely sort of bump into that. Interestingly, I think if you were to compare top halves to top halves, we're pretty much the same, but my order's a little different. I'm going to put The Village Bride as my number 1.
Really?
I really enjoyed The Village Bride. I don't entirely know why, but I really did. As to what it was, and again, it's one of these where it's hard for me to place my finger on what I liked about it so much. I just really did. I would probably put The Duel as my number 2, but it's really between The Duel and The Ninth Jedi and number 2 and number 3.
Yeah,
that is a hard
I could have gone
decision.
back and forth on those as well.
Between those, my number 4 is probably going to be Akakiri. Again, one that could be higher, but isn't necessarily as to what it was. I'm going to break with Ben, and I'm going to put Lapa Nocho as my next one in conjunction with it.
I think I'd agree with that. I'd put it solidly in the middle. Like, I think if the rabbit character had been different, it might have climbed up for me. But
I'm also going to disagree with you. I'm going to put Tatooine Rhapsody as my next one. I actually kind of like Tatooine Rhapsody. Again, a part of what I liked about it is that concept of music as the weapon. And what it can be. From that, as I'm getting sort of down into the bottom here, it gets, I think, a little more difficult. I'm probably going to put The Twins above The Elder just because I really did kind of love that battle scene and thought it was kind of neat as to what it was. And then I'm going to put Toby at the bottom. Again, I just found Toby to be it was difficult to scan the plot. It was, it was a long-term thing, and I just felt like it didn't work.
Yep.
But yeah, I think what we find with it, I think our top 5 and our bottom 5 are probably similar.
Close, yeah.
But we had some definitely those sort of changes between them as to which one we liked. So.
All right, shifting gears, let's talk about The Bad Batch. So Kirk's already done an episode on this, which I still haven't listened to this day, because I didn't want to have any spoilers. So I'm going to have to go listen to that after this episode.
And I think I did that after I'd seen it all. I'm trying to remember if I'd seen all of it, or I may have actually seen it, but having not seen the very last episode, I can't remember.
Entirely possible. So a fair warning for... so once again, spoilers if you're still here and haven't seen The Bad Batch. We're going to get spoilers.
And I would tell you, Bad Batch is worth watching not knowing what's going on.
Absolutely. I would totally agree. So I'm going to say I watched The Bad Batch, but to be more honest, I would say I listened to probably the first 7 episodes because over the weekend I had to paint a room, and so I just put it on my phone and let it play while I was painting and got through the first 6 or 7, maybe 8 episodes, mostly just listening to it. And then I watched the last couple. So my impression may be different than Kirk's because I didn't actually see a lot of it, but listening to it, I can tell you that there is about 5 to 6 minutes of plot in each one, and the rest is filler and action. But having seen the action in the latter episodes, that is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because overall, I thought it was extremely well put together. The characters are kind of borderline stock characters, all of them.
It's the A-Team, let's be realistic.
That's funny, I was going to say, it's basically the A-Team. It's some kind of special forces ensemble cast. So let's talk about the basic plot. We start off, it opens up during Order 66.
Well, we one of the things to put in, I think it's worth noting, if you've seen the Clone Wars, the animated Clone Wars, the Bad Batch is introduced in the Clone Wars, with Echo being the important character who is one of the old clone troopers that was an actual named character, was captured and modified into Echo, which is a bit of his. He has obviously some issues with that. It's a bit of RoboCop, quite frankly. Sort of in that. That then becomes the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch are they join up and become the Bad Batch. You don't give a lot of history about the Bad Batch, and I mentioned it in the original episode. I mentioned it in my short episode. I did not like the Bad Batch in Clone Wars. I didn't like them at all. I thought they were.
Was it the same characters?
Exact same characters. I thought it was a forced group. It felt too much like the A-Team, and it felt too much like, we need something that isn't clones just to be interesting.
Yeah.
But they're clones, but they're interesting. And it was like, okay, yeah, whatever. So I was very lukewarm, as you'll find out last year about our episode talking about this on the Clone Wars. I didn't really think it was going to be that good. My kids, however, loved the Clone Wars episodes and wanted to watch the Clone Wars, so we decided to watch it. I will say, quite frankly, I did a complete 180 in the course of watching this. But yeah, so you basically get the start of the Clone Wars. You can give the synopsis if you want to.
So the premise is that the Bad Batch is a special experimental small batch of clones who are genetically modified to amplify certain characteristics. You've got one of them is sort of your stereotypical small squad leader. That's Hunter. You've got the
Rambo-esque.
Yeah. You got Egon Spengler, who is the tech, and then you've got Wrecker, who is your sort of brawler type. Although I thought his name was Eureka for the longest time, because there's also a clone called Omega, and she's played by an actress with a thick New Zealand accent. So when she says Rekka, she says Rika. And I kept thinking she was saying Eureka, and it took me a while to figure out that she's from New Zealand. So this is how she says Rekka. It sounds like Rika. So Wrecker, and then there is Echo, who Kirk just mentioned, and there is a fifth one, Crosshair, who's like the sniper character. He winds up being the villain, sort of, in this series. So.
Yeah, and again, it's all the same characters were introduced originally in the Clone Wars. Again, Echo was added. Echo was, I can't remember what his name was, as a clone trooper. I think he's 6's, if I remember correctly. He is modified by I can't remember what they are, the Tech Alliance, or whatever they're called. They're introduced in episode 1.
The Kaminoans?
No, it's the mechanized guys who like push the buttons to talk. I can't think what they are. It's Tech Alliance or something like that. He's modified to basically be half droid, and he's obviously messed up by that experience. He's rescued as part of Clone Wars, and he realizes he no longer fits with the rest of the clones, which is why he joins. The Bad Batch.
So the other clones are called regs, like regular clones, and they all have designations like CC dash, whatever their serial number is. These guys are CT or CX or C something else.
Yeah, and they're all 99 because they're batch 99.
Yeah, and so the Bad Batch series opens in the middle of Order 66. Or actually, it starts about 5 minutes before Order 66. All the clones turn on the Jedi, except for the Bad Batch, who, because of their alterations, are not affected by the programming that's supposed to make them follow the Emperor's
Somehow. They're
order.
very confused. A couple of them are getting headaches and
They
stuff
don't really
like
understand what's going on. Crosshair kind of wants to comply with the order, but still doesn't fully. The main Jedi we're following is killed by the clone troopers. Her Padawan escapes, played by Freddie Prinze Jr. I later found out. I don't know why they started there, because he's never in the rest of the series after that.
I think he's going to come back. My guess is it's an important thing that he escapes, so somebody needed to escape.
Yeah. And then, and so the Bad Batch return to Kamino, where things are afoot, and then really the whole premise and the backdrop of the series, which Kirk, I'm gonna guess, lights on in his prior episode, is the transition from Republic to Empire. We see the Empire beginning to clamp down on things, keep better track of people. It really becomes more authoritarian. And we see kind of the process of that happening, how it's happening slowly, and the transition away from using clones as basically a military operation to conscripts.
And stormtroopers.
And there's two things that happen throughout the series that was very subtly introduced, but I thought was excellent. One is the stormtroopers are given the designation TK. Which from Star Wars, TK421, why aren't you at your post? The first thing I thought when I saw that was, oh my gosh, that's what that is. Also, they emphasize over and over that although that the clones are too expensive to feed, maintain, and produce, so the government is reconsidering its contract with the Kaminoans.
Whereas conscripts are free because the Empire just convinces them it's what they should do.
But they keep saying, but they're less skilled, which I think is a nod to the famous, the stormtroopers can't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah, I mean, they play around a lot. The big thing I got with it, and one of the big things focuses with it, is what is a clone if it's not a clone trooper? And that's one of the sort of big focuses, because again, you also have the stars of this are not really clone troopers. They're all individuals, they're all different. And they introduced some of the clones from previous things that we've bumped into.
But they are presumably cloned from Jango Fett. They mention that over and over. They talk about how there's only 2 complete copies of Jango Fett's DNA. One is Boba, who's missing, and the other one is Omega, a special clone they created.
Yeah. And you find that about halfway through, that Omega is actually a direct clone of Jango Fett.
You find out right away that she's also a clone, but you don't know that she's a special type of clone because she has this. And that also explains, I think, why almost all the main actors in this have Australian or New Zealand accents. Because Tamura Morrison, who played Jango Fett, was from New Zealand. So
the other thing that's interesting about it just is one of those sort of interesting backdrops. If you've noticed in the credits, the entire Bad Batch is all voiced by the same actor.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That makes sense, I guess.
and occasionally you hear something where it's like, wait, that sounds like Crosshair, and it's not. But you get into some of those kind of things.
Interestingly, since I was listening to it, I didn't know which character was which, and I had to kind of figure it out from context. Tech was easy to pick out.
Yeah.
And Wrecker, of course, was really easy to pick out, and so was Crosshair because the words just drip out of his mouth like oil. But between Hunter and Echo, I couldn't always tell who was talking.
Yeah. And so it's one of those where you get this backdrop of what it is. You find out all the clones. You really get, and what I really loved about Clone Wars as a whole is you are seeing the Empire form.
Yep.
And the Empire and the Bad Batch gets this is a bad thing, and you see the Clan, there's one of the episodes entirely has to do with getting passage for a civilian off planet.
Yeah.
There's not much plot, but it's a really important.
But they introduce these chain codes that you can't, you can't leave a spaceport without a certain code. The code has to be authorized by the Empire. So you're seeing them kind of clamp down on the civilian population, inhibit movement, very like Soviet Union type stuff.
And again, some of the plays around in conjunction with Rebels, having watched Rebels, and there is a crossover episode in conjunction with it where you meet the Twi'lek captain in Rebels as a younger child in Clone Wars. And that's sort of, and part of the story.
That's the Ryloth episode, because I wondered if there's a lot of emphasis.
She's she Twi'lek or is she a Ryloth? I think about it.
Well, the Twi'leks are on Ryloth.
Okay, that's right. Okay. And so, and that kind of thing with it, where, she's introduced as a younger child, and they talk about some of the backdrop that she's talked about in Rebels. And I thought that was really cool, the fact that these are ongoing. And to me, it also hammered home that in Rebels, you see the foundation of the rebellion. In Bad Batch, we're going to see the foundation of the Empire. That's really what this is.
And you also see there's a little more, there's like political machinations, but not in a prequel way where it's extremely boring and dry. You see how the Empire is leveraging what it's got, leveraging its assets, leveraging politics to gain control over these systems. And you see the promise of peace. They talk over and over about how the war is over, you're safe now, we've protected you, we're rebuilding your economy, we're rebuilding factories and jobs, and hey, having a battalion of stormtroopers around to keep law and order, you don't need your armies anymore, we'll take care of all that for you.
To quote Mandalorian, what the people want is order.
Yes.
And you see that really coming in. The chain codes are a perfect example. You really see the idea of what are you giving up to get a chain code? Oh, well, you give up everything about being an individual and give yourself entirely over to the Empire. But by doing so, you get access to everything. It's easy.
Yep.
It's got some modern, worries in it.
There's some Big Brother stuff going on. It's a little Orwellian, yeah. And some even stuff like I said, with chain code is sort of the, isn't this kind of like your smartphone? And things like that. And that's, to me, that was what really, really worked in Clone Wars and was really working. There's some stuff about, Omega. I think there is still, a lot of kids stuff in it, for lack of a better way. Yeah, the Omega character is probably 10 to 12, I guess.
Yeah.
10 to 12-year-old girl. Old enough to be able to do things, but young enough to be vulnerable, which I thought was a good casting, a good character design.
Yeah, she's definitely still a kid, but she's competent. She's kind of a tech genius. You get the impression, which you learn why, later on in conjunction with the stuff with Jango Fett, and then, in her creation.
Yeah.
And I think that's the real thing, as I have with Clone Wars, the way I'd say Clone Wars, with the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch is the first episodes and the last two, and it is really two separate shows.
Yeah, so the middle section of the Bad Batch, they kind of escape from Kamino because Crosshair turns on them. They escape from Kamino.
Crosshair turns on them. You think because his chip, you find out his chip was not. And they don't install their chips, so they can't.
They all have inhibitor chips that are supposed to control how they operate, and they don't really work on most of them. But they
discussed in great detail in the last season of the Clone Wars.
Yeah. But the middle third of it, they kind of get to a planet where they're basically doing missions and quests for a character named Sid, played by Rhea Perlman from Cheers, who does like a great, I don't know how to describe it. She just kind of talks like this. All right, you guys, I've got a mission. She reminds me of Roz from Monsters, Inc. a little bit. But Rhea Perlman plays that character. She's kind of dry, sarcastic. She used to kind of help the Jedi out with stuff, so she's got a soft spot for these guys. But she's also trying to find her way in this new world, and so
she's a job ass.
Yeah, a little bit. But not evil. But she kind of hands out the missions for a while, which kind of sends the characters around and kind of keeps the plot moving forward. There are some filler episodes that don't really do much, and I just to Kirk's point, I think a lot of it was making references and tying in other material that I just haven't seen yet, like the Ryloth scene. There's a great sequence on a Crash Star Destroyer where they take the chips out. That's well done. And then one thing throughout that I thought was maybe it's because I listened to the first half of it. The sound design in this series is exceptional.
Yeah,
the way that they reused or even did new sounds, it sounded like Star Wars in a way that I've never noticed before in a series like this.
Yeah, the big thing I had with this, and again, I've seen all of Clone Wars, and I've seen back to the first 2 seasons of Rebels. The one thing about Bad Batch is there's a lot of references to both the other animated series. Clone Wars having been in the past what it is, and essentially Rebels occurring shortly after, I think, what's going to be the Bad
they meet
Batch.
Saw Gerrera early on here.
Yeah, and so, you definitely get some sort of pull-ins, things like that. And there some of the things with it I also think are tie-ins that I didn't necessarily get. There's some tie-ins to Ahsoka.
I wondered about that, yeah.
They're sort of coming in there. That's one with the Star Destroyer. I kind of wondered if that was a connection there. And so, there's a lot to it, and that's the thing with the Bad Batch. You don't need any of this background, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Easter eggs if you've really into the Star Wars universe.
I've seen the first 2 episodes of Clone Wars, and that's it. So I don't know any of this stuff, and I was able to follow the plot really well.
Yeah, and again, having seen it, like I know the stuff with the inhibitor chips. I mean, if you want to, and I would suggest that if you're going to watch Bad Batch, it's worthwhile watching the final season of Clone Wars when it's actually called the final season of Clone Wars, because the final season of Clone Wars sets up Episode 3, of the Star Wars trilogy itself, or Star Wars series itself, movies itself.
Revenge of the Sith, yeah.
Revenge of the Sith. And also gives you a lot of the background, like why does Order 66 work? What is Order 66? How is it planned? It also quite frankly gives you a little more background in Camino and some of the stuff of Bad Batch and where this is. You even get the fact that sort of at the end of Clone Wars, there's already questions about Camino.
Yeah.
They're going to really want Camino. And the Emperor in particular, who we know Darth Tyrannus was involved potentially in conjunction with setting up Camino as a lover, that this has been a manipulation for a long period of time. And he always intends to get rid of the clones and replace them with conscripts.
This is one thing I thought I really liked about the Bad Batch is it made me understand what was going on better in the actual episode 1, 2, 2 and 3 more so than 1. One's kind of a throwaway, but episode 2 and 3 in particular.
Episode 3.
Yeah, the plot. Basically, I never really fully understood who was on which side, and so this kind of makes clear it's the Separatists and the the Droid Army versus the Republic and the Clone Army, and that I think is probably explained pretty well in the Clone Wars series, which I didn't see though before seeing episode 3. So episode 3 just opens with this gigantic space battle. I don't know who's on which side. I don't know which ships belong to who. I don't have any of this background. So I see these Star Destroyer looking things. Was that the bad guys? Because I'm used to that being the bad guys. Was that the good guys? And all those sort of that ambiguity really was not present here. I think they did just a nice job of explaining the who's on which side and why. I still don't fully understand how Palpatine's plan worked, other than he's
it's to create the war so he gets the army so he takes over, which is a little bit of what you get is once he's in power. And again, the political machinations. You see the Emperor being a bit of a political animal in Bad Batch, and using
a lot of propaganda,
using propaganda and stuff like that. The other problem they've got, and I'm thinking this is something Bad Batch is going to get into, is how do you get from the Separatists to the Rebellion? Mm-hmm. Because they're on the same side in the end, and yet they're the opposite, good and evil, in conjunction with the way the movies work. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that in connection with this as well, because we've obviously got clone troopers that were on the side of the Republic that are presumably going to oppose the Empire.
Yep.
And so we've got them sort of transitioning. So again, to me, the Bad Batch really worked from that point of view. And that's what a lot of these middle episodes are, is, again, this foundation of the Empire, this introduction, and a lot of explanation, a lot of
world building,
loose ends together. And again, I think it did tie a lot of loose ends together. A lot of these characters appear in other things. And again, I can't even remember, as Ben's talking about this, there are things which I'm thinking of occurring, and I can't quite frankly place right now if they happened in Rebels or in the Bad Batch, because they are sort of simultaneously timing-wise, and they did interact. It's like, wait, did this happen there? Did this happen there? Which was which? I think that's good. In some sense, I think it's what The Mandalorian is also doing, quite frankly, later on in the ties, is it's kind of doing the same type of thing. And I'm wondering if that's a theme of Disney, is trying to tie the world together so that the movies fit together better.
I also like the use of existing characters in this. Tarkin's there a little bit, but not too much. He's there at the beginning where it makes sense. But then at some point, he's got other things to do, and he disappears from the plot for a while. And there's no kind of... I kept waiting for some corny, oh, look, there's Chewbacca type thing to happen. Nothing like that. It's really kind of focused on its own characters. and pretty effectively done that way. And I actually thought the ending where, spoiler alert, they destroy the Camino cloning facility, execute the prime minister, and kind of tie up some loose ends, very, very Empire-like. And the scene, I didn't expect to really care about it at all, but the scene where they have these 3 Star Destroyers come in and blow up the city was well done and dramatic, and for a piece of animation, pretty impactful.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I had from it. I don't think I mentioned it in my Clone Wars episode, though I might have. My Bad Batch episode, though I might have. Is I was stunned at how sad I was over the death of Camino.
Yeah, I didn't expect to be, because I didn't give a crap about it at all. Yeah, I couldn't care less.
Camino was annoying in the movies, and suddenly watching it sink was like, wait. Like, something's been lost.
Yeah, you really felt like it was like the true passing. Like, okay, well, the old world's officially gone, right? Because this is the last sort of institution of the Republic, and now it's literally sunk.
And the way of doing it, where it was these Star Destroyers just sort of facelessly executing orders.
Very businesslike. The captain just stands there and says, okay, fire. And Tarkin says, fire when you're ready, and he fires and blows it up, and they're like, all right, sir, it's sunk. Like, all right, let's get out of here. Let's
move on, And so, and to me, and again, that was the thing with it, that's the Empire.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden, and that was the thing to me, was when you see the Star Destroyers open fire on Camino, for the first time, you truly have the Empire.
Yeah.
You know, as we see it in conjunction with, episodes, 4 through 6.
Yep.
And that's what I loved about it. I mean, that really was what I loved about The Bad Batch, is watching that happen. And I'm very curious as to where it's going to go, because we now have that. We have those pieces where it's like, wait, this can really work, in the future. This can really make sense, as a future plot line and as a place to go. The other thing I liked, and again, major spoiler alert if you haven't stopped as to what this is, who the hell is Crosshair? And you find out at the end, in conjunction with the final sort of, showdown with Crosshair, they say, it's all your inhibitor chip because you haven't had yours removed. You have removed ours, and Crosshair says, no, I had mine removed long ago.
Yep.
And it is my decision to stay here.
And he stays on Camino by himself. They fly away. All that's left is like one landing platform.
Yes, the secret landing platform that's hidden, which is actually kind of a cool scene of what it is. And you find out it's because it's her private one, and the cloners. They get a lot into the politics behind Camino, quite frankly.
Yeah, which is also well done. And then the Kaminoan scientist who designed the cloning facility, she is
and the Bad Batch.
Yeah. She's taken by the Empire, and they just kind of vaguely say, "You're going to do great things for us," and it's not really explained what. Yeah. So I'm curious if she winds up being involved in the Death Star or in something else they're going to do.
Yeah, she's taken to a facility that looks vaguely like the facilities, quite frankly, the Mandalorian. We know are secret Imperial facilities, secret Imperial science facilities. The one that struck me was the appearance in Mandalorian. We find the secret facility that Mandalorian goes to destroy was a cloning facility. Yeah, it looks a whole lot like that facility that
it's kind of built into the mountain.
Yep, and you got to wonder if it's the same facility, same reference, as to what it is. What I got from it, and again, the things with sort of the end and the Kaminoans, the relationship between the Bad Batch, what we had those very end scenes with Crosshair was, what does it mean to be part of the Empire? One obvious thing is Crosshair is lying. That is definitely a possibility. We have seen Crosshair undergoing surgery early on it in conjunction with the inhibitor chip. We don't know whether or not he has one or did have one. Whether we know he has some further modification. We don't know what it is. Has he been programmed to lie? That he actually did take his inhibitor chip out and they put something new in him? Or he's been indoctrinated in some other way? That's, I think, the thing that we're going to potentially get into in the next season. But I thought the fact that Crosshair did not rejoin them was an extremely interesting thing. And he stays behind on the planet with the idea that presumably the Imperial, like a TIE fighter, is going to come rescue him. He did set off a beacon that would, attract the Empire. Actually, I think he is picked up. I think about it at the end.
Is he at the end? Okay.
Yeah, I think he is picked up now I think about it.
I think that last episode, one of the last lines of the show is from, I think, Tech, who has maybe one of the best lines of a TV series I've seen in years. He is they're talking, and he says something that kind of explains like Crosshair's point of view, and Crosshair says, "Oh, I didn't think you were an imperialist," and Tech says, "Just because I understand you doesn't mean I agree with you." And that is a nuance that I think we have largely lost at this point in our overall sort of social and political dialogue, is the ability to understand each other. And if you understand someone's side, people just assume that you agree with them, but that's not necessarily the case. And I like that they made a point to say, like, Tech can understand where he's coming from and why he believes what he believes while still thinking he's wrong.
Yeah, and again, it's to me like the last 2 episodes of The Bad Batch are a wholly different show than the rest of it is. Because all of a sudden it's one it becomes a lot darker for one.
It really does, yeah.
And you also get, quite frankly, to me it's the old, sort of Star Trek things, and you go back to 70s and 80s TV. The 2-parter episode at the end of the season can tell you there's going to be another one, whereas all the rest are serialized and are standalone episodes. You kind of get that feel in conjunction with the Bad Batch.
That's a very mission-based, kind of syndicated feel. A little bit like the first season of The Mandalorian, where he was just kind of going from place to place, and you had sort of an isolated story in one place, and then at the end you kind of tie some points together and move on.
Yeah, and again, I think that was probably some of the where did people like it. I've got to presume there's going to be a second season of The Bad Batch.
I'm sure,
well. But yeah, it's... If you've listened to all this and you haven't watched it, obviously go watch it, even though we've completely spoiled all the spoilers for you. If you haven't seen it as well, if you've seen The Bad Batch and haven't seen it, I would recommend watching at least the final season of Clone Wars. I know Disney posts up like the essential episodes, essential Darth Vader episodes, essential Ahsoka episodes, stuff like that for Clone Wars. I think the more I've been watching these shows and what's been interesting to me, and just, we just finished season 2 of Rebels this last week for me and my kids, or me and my son in particular. My daughter's not as into that one. It is astounding me how much I'm enjoying the animated series in conjunction with Star Wars. How much, to my mind, the serialized format of Star Wars works so much better than the movies. And how much interesting stuff there is in Rebels. I started off really not liking Rebels. I didn't think it was something I was going to particularly care for. I mean, after watching the first episode, I kind of resisted continuing to watch it with my son. You got to make it through, I'd say, is sort of the first half of the first season.
That's kind of typical with a new series.
Yeah, it's a little rough. It's kind of, to me, it's too much of we need another Jedi and Apprentice story.
Yeah.
And then it gets into, let's talk about how Jedi temples work and how Sith temples work. And suddenly as I'm looking at the previews for episode for season 3, I'm sitting here and I'm like, we've got the foundations of the Death Star. We've got the foundations of Grand Admiral Thrawn coming into play. We've really got the explanation of Mustafar. And what the hell is Mustafar? And how does it involve these kind of, and Darth Vader. I remember people talking about, the showdown between Ahsoka and Vader for the first time, which is in the climax of season 2 of Rebels, and how tragic of a scene it is. And it's one of those where it's amazing how well that scene works, even though there's very little of it. And knowing what you already know, obviously Ahsoka has her own show, stuff like that. They leave it as a cliffhanger what happens between the two of them at the end of season 2. Now, obviously, Darth Vader survives because he's Darth Vader.
Yeah.
You actually see him fly away. But you get this kind of what's going to happen, what's going on here, type of things in conjunction with this. There's much more here, as to what it is. And they're starting to tie pieces together so that all of a sudden, parts of The Mandalorian are making more sense to me. Parts of Rogue One are making more sense to me. Parts of Solo are making more sense to me.
Yeah, this is where I think the serialized format, it gives these stories and characters room to breathe, which is something that's badly missing from a film that costs $200 million to make, and you've got 2 hours to make all that money back. I mean, that's a big ask. So I mentioned this in one of my prior Edamame episodes. I just feel like this is the future of sci-fi, is the serialized format. So one more thing I wanted to mention about The Bad Batch, then we'll wrap this up. I think we would be remiss if we did not mention the scene involving the competing bounty hunters on the Not Tabana gas mine. One is like an Old West gunslinger type, and the other one is like a ninja kind of, maybe? Yeah, I'm not sure. So if you haven't seen it, you'll know when you get to that sequence, but it is basically an abandoned Bespin type place where these two bounty hunters are fighting with each other over who has.
That's the Tech Alliance, if I remember rightly, and that's where Echo is from. That's the issue there. And again, that's right. I don't remember which one of those is Bad Batch and which one of those is in Clone Wars. But yeah, the mine that they have the bounty hunter battle in is where Tech is from. That's what it was made into what he is.
All right. Well, anyway, that's those two characters are only in, I think, that one. Well, the blue guy is only in that one episode, and he is very well characterized. Very, very Western.
I kind of wonder how much the popularity of Boba Fett has made them make bounty hunters a much more interesting level of character. Because we see him in even The Mandalorian. We get the background of the bounty hunters. We see more bounty hunters. I mean, the droid's a great one.
There's a whole system of commerce involving how they operate, and there's norms, and it's just interesting.
Yeah, and so I kind of have to wonder, how much of it was the popularity of Boba Fett ended up making bounty hunters more interesting. You've seen that in shows, and again, I can't remember which character it is because I I haven't watched the end seasons, but in Game of Thrones, there's the character who like rows off, from the thing, and it's going to be row forever. Literally gets reintroduced by George Martin because of the fact that he's popular in the TV show, and so he kind of gives him something to do later on in the books because he was intended to never come back. I kind of have to wonder how much the popularity of Boba Fett made bounty hunters more popular, and they played around with bounty hunters more as an interesting class of people we can talk about. So.
All right, so that's our Star Wars content for 2021. Our next episode will be our Public Domain Day episode, which we will record after the first of the year. And then, if you follow us on Twitter, you know that I've got a couple more Edamame episodes to spit out. Kirk may or may not have one here. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But
see what we talk about.
But yeah, so we'll have some stuff to you over the holidays here, and then Kirk and I will join forces again to talk about all of the amazing works from the 1920s that are now in the public domain. We're not quite to Mickey Mouse, but boy, are we getting close.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's all for today. We'll see you next time. Lauren, play us out.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by Lewis Rice LLC, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. This podcast was produced and recorded in St. Louis, Missouri.